Hi, and thank you all for being here. My name is Richard Burki. I run a company called Phonic Studios, and we're an immersive sound production company. Thank you very much. And we focus exclusively on producing 3D sound and music. We have a rather unique expertise when it comes to 3D sound, especially focusing on creating immersive experiences which are indistinguishable from reality, or at least as indistinguishable from reality as the technology will allow. So our expertise actually goes back to a series of studios in the Benelux, which really pioneered immersive audio over the course of the last 15 years, especially in film, working for people such as George Lucas back in the day. And well, I think maybe the first thing I should point out is what we mean when we say immersive, because there's a lot of different interpretations of the word. And I think everybody has their own ideas when it comes to immersive audio as well. For us, it's really about recreating a three-dimensional experience that immerses the listener the way that audio actually immerses us in real life. So we're really trying to go for a sense of realism, but I'm by no means a purist. So we do a lot of heinous things with audio as well, but it's more about really transporting a listener into a certain three-dimensional experience. So as this slide suggests, why should you care about immersive audio? For today, I don't really want to talk about the technology too much. I think everyone's already heard plenty about all the different formats and the technologies we have available. For me, the focus is more on the future of what the music experience is going to be. So we really see technologies such as Dolby Atmos as one piece of a much larger puzzle in terms of how the digital landscape is developing itself. I think we've already heard terms such as the metaverse being thrown around, virtual reality, augmented reality as well. But I think what all these things share in common, whether it's VR, AR, or even the mobiles everyone's got in their pocket right now, is that we're seeing a new era in digital media, which is really about the convergence of media. So we're starting to see the line blurring more and more between things such as film, between music, and all those different experiences. And I think that's just a hint at what's to come. So going forward, I think we'll see the line blurring more and more between the digital world and our own. And as I think some people have already mentioned, there's already quite a few examples of that, such as the Fortnite concerts with Travis Scott. But also here you have the whole ABBA concert with their virtual avatars as well, which I think is a very interesting case on its own. And of course, we all know about formats such as Dolby Atmos pushing more towards creating immersive music experiences as well. However, I only really think that these things kind of scratch the surface of what immersive technologies are really about. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities as well with the technologies we're already seeing now to create more meaningful and deeper and longer lasting connections with your fans and your listeners. And I want to talk a little bit about what can be done and what kind of experiences you can create. I don't necessarily think that some of the things we've been talking about today, such as the Travis Scott concerts as well, those are really big undertakings for any artist, and you don't necessarily need a multi-million budget in order to start creating immersive experiences today already. So for us, maybe a bit of background on some of the projects we've done as well. We did a lot of location-based experiences. So this was a theater experience we actually did where we produced a whole 360 album along with the artist Hugh Baving, which was a composer and pianist. And we essentially, I think this was one of the more exciting projects for us as well, because we really got to practice implementing immersive on as many fronts as possible. So there was meant to be a digital release of the album, which was going to be released in Dolby Atmos. Also on location, we actually set up a pretty massive immersive sound system, which had immersive playback on location in 3D, along with real-time tracking of the live musicians, which were also performing there. And that was being mixed in real time with 3D reverberation into that three-dimensional experience. And this was a really interesting, I think, theater experience where they kind of try to push the envelope on every front possible. So they had 360 LED projections, a 3D sound system. They even involved some illusionists, and a variety of disciplines came together to really create what I think was a very interesting immersive experience. Unfortunately, they decided to launch that on the first wave of COVID. So I'll leave it at that. But beyond that, of course, you all know immersive from film. So we've been working on different films, doing post-production, but also sound design, actually composing scores where we start from immersive first. I think if any of you have been past Tottenham Court Road as well, there's a new Outernet Center where we did an experience called Room to Breathe. If you haven't had the chance to experience it, I recommend you pop through there and well, take a minute to breathe. Then beyond that, we've also worked on a lot of virtual reality experiences, from VR rides to films to music experiences. There's a lot of opportunities there to, I think, create compelling, especially music experiences that, for the most part, we're really just seeing the beginning of. I think for a lot of VR, especially, the focus tends to be heavily on the visual side. And not a lot of people really think about the sound or the music and how that can play a part in the experience. So that's something we're looking forward to seeing more of. And then, of course, a lot of Dolby Atmos work since the whole adoption of Apple Music. I think we spent about 4 or 5 years trying to explain immersive to all kinds of record labels, from the majors to the much smaller independent ones. And whilst they all thought it was awesome and they told us they would give us a ring, that never happened. But of course, that changed when the whole Dolby Atmos and Apple Music partnership came into play. And I think in the course of the same week, we probably had every record label call us back and ask us if we could please come explain all that crap again. So beyond that, one thing that we especially focus on is actually coming from a perspective that's immersive first, where we're not just looking at it as an afterthought, but really considering it from the conceptual stage. Especially trying to focus more on actually capturing and creating immersive recordings. And I think even amongst audio professionals, there's a surprising lack of understanding, lack of knowledge of what's already been achieved and just how far we've come in terms of 3D audio reproduction and the possibilities that this presents. So that's really a gap we've been trying to bridge. So essentially, we can already deploy all kinds of immersive experiences, be it for location-based experiences or online. The important thing with our approach is really that we're trying to think immersive first, so not merely as an afterthought, as I mentioned before. And I think an example could be that, for instance, a lot of what we're seeing right now with Dolby Atmos is upmixing of back catalog tracks or new releases, for instance. And in a lot of cases, as everybody's already mentioned before, that does kind of strap you to some limitations in terms of the creative possibilities, be that the files themselves, or be it the intention, the original intent of the artist as well, which you have to remain faithful to. So we try to think of immersive from the perspective that, imagine if instead of simply upmixing a track, right now, when you go on Apple Music, for instance, you're essentially listening to two different files. And for the most part, what we've seen so far is that the immersive version is trying, for the most part again, to mirror the stereo version, which for us seems like a missed opportunity. And I think that it'll be much more interesting if we take the perspective that, imagine when you hit that spatial button on your iPhone, the recording you're actually listening to is an entirely different interpretation of what the stereo track was doing. So if you start thinking on those lines, then immersive audio actually becomes a secondary creative outlet. And I think that that has much more value for your listeners and much more potential also to drive the adoption of immersive audio and the demand for those kind of experiences. Because essentially you're creating an exclusive experience, which is really meant to be experienced in immersive. And I don't think the same can be said for a lot of what we're hearing at the moment, unfortunately. So this is something we're actually focusing on right now with a lot of artists and labels to try and explore immersive more from the conceptual stage and not merely as an add-on or an afterthought. And I think that really opens up a lot of opportunities in the emerging tech space that we're seeing as well, such as the metaverse, VR, but when you actually create content which is tailored towards those mediums. So essentially, we really see Dolby and all those formats as a small part of a much bigger puzzle. And I'm really behind on my slides now, so I'm going to kind of skip through this. So, of course, there's a lot of different solutions. I think some of them already been mentioned today. But there's all kinds of ways that you can already start getting immersive content to your listeners on all kinds of platforms and in all kinds of mediums as well. So as I was just mentioning, I think the opportunities are quite vast when it comes to which markets you can penetrate with immersive audio experiences. It's also spread across a lot of mediums. And I think that being at the forefront of creating innovative music experiences opens the conversation to get involved in a lot of projects in a way that traditional music doesn't really. So the fact that you start to think of immersive concepts in terms of creating an immersive experience allows you to be much more involved in how people are shaping virtual reality experiences, be it or location-based experiences as well. And we see that as a very interesting opportunity for artists to get involved in really being at the forefront of all these technological developments. Now, I'm by no means an advocate for the metaverse or Web3. I think there's a lot of skepticism around those fields, and rightfully so. There's a lot of hype, and unfortunately, I think just like with any technology, when it's the first wave rolling out, there's a lot of people which are there for perhaps the wrong reasons, a lot of opportunistic pursuits, and a lot of hype, especially. I think if we just look at some of the crypto market stuff that's been happening lately, as well as, some Bored Apes and those kind of things, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the skepticism is probably justified for now. However, all these things, whilst they're rather gimmicky, again, form one piece of a much bigger picture, and what we believe is essentially the first wave of technology rolling out for consumers that's foreshadowing a much bigger change in the industry, which several people have already touched upon today. And it's a change that really has the potential, and I think this is really hard to envisage from where we're standing at this point in time, but it really has the potential to change not just entertainment, but how we work with education. It's already changing and affecting things such as healthcare as well. And it really has a potential to redefine several markets and industries and aspects of our daily life. And I believe we're already seeing this in film, we're already seeing this in gaming, and we're already seeing this across a variety of mediums right now. So perhaps someday things such as the advent of MTV, what we also saw with music streaming, or even the internet itself might just look like a very small footprint in a much larger technological development. It's essentially a new emerging digital landscape, which we're seeing. And that kind of brings me to why now is a very interesting time to start getting involved as well. So what we're seeing is the first wave of mass adoption for consumers, especially when it comes to immersive audio. We have all these new technologies rolling out, from smart speakers to soundbars to headphones with binaural and head-tracked audio as well. So that consumer technology is really starting to roll out at a dazzling speed. And I think over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, we're just going to see it becoming more and more commonplace and more accessible for people. So for most consumers, they likely won't even realize that they're now experiencing content in immersive. It's just going to be a pretty seamless transition from their perspective. So I guess what I'm really trying to say, and the main point of my conversation, is that those bold enough to explore the space now will probably be the ones defining and really pioneering what the future of the music industry is going to look like. Thank you very much for your time, and